Whenever there is a problem, whenever something isn't working, what does that really mean? It means we can throw up our arms and say, all right, it's broken, there's nothing we can do. Or we can say, look at how much opportunity we now have to get in there and make things better. And that is what nurse coaches are doing.
All right, nurses, nurse coaches, welcome back. Welcome to the episode called Rising Exponentially, where today we are going to talk about the exponential rise of nurse coaching over these past few years, what it has been looking like, and what it's projected to look like over these next few years.
Exactly. So last week, I was on a live Q&A call with like a couple hundred nurses, some of who were just hearing of nurse coaching for the first time, some of whom have literally been thinking this over for the last couple of years. And I got a question that I actually don't hear very often, but I think it is a question that you and I talk about all the time. So what this nurse asked is, she said, I'm so excited about the field of nurse coaching. Everything that I've learned, it sounds like exactly what I'm looking for, but I've done a lot of things in my nursing career and they've been hit or miss and haven't always panned out to be exactly what I thought they were going to be. So what I need to know before I get ready to dive into this field that is new for me, for her, she said, I need to know, what is the future of nurse coaching? Is this a passing fad, or is this something that is going to be around for a while?
Is nurse coaching a passing fad? I might start by asking, well, is chronic disease a passing fad? Are the hundreds of millions of people that are overweight and obese, is that a passing fad? Are these hundreds of millions of people that are experiencing mild to moderate mental health issues, is that a passing fad? How about overprescribing? And I mean, when we step back and we actually look at the volume of numbers there, like, it's astounding. 2/3 of people are on one or more prescription medications. 2/3 of people are experiencing one or more chronic illnesses. And as I said, hundreds of millions of people experiencing mild to moderate mental health issues. Like, the level of sickness inside of our country is just, it's overwhelming. And I feel as though, sometimes we only see what we see. But when you couple that with the sickness experienced as nurses, right? On average, nurses are more sick and less well than the general population, which I think is saying a lot.
Well, you just said everything that you just laid out about what the average American, what our health as a population looks like. Okay, then say that the nurses are on average more unhealthy than your everyday American. That is saying a lot. I mean, it's sad. It's horrifying when you really look at the numbers and when you really look at those statistics.
And that all gets coupled with the fact that 90% of nurses are experiencing burnout, either right now or over the past year. And so where is that trend going? Is that going in the right direction, where every year we're seeing more and more people become, less chronically ill, less amount of prescribing, where people are getting more fit holistically, mind, body, spirit? No, we're seeing the exact opposite direction.
Right. So back to your initial question, which is, are all of these things that we're seeing from a population standpoint, is that a passing fad? And now nursing, right, is everything that the nursing population is facing, the burnout, the high turnover rate, the being ready to do something different in their career, is that a passing fad? And I wish, I think that's the whole point of why nurse coaching exists, because that is what we want. That is what we're striving for. But when we look at the numbers, when we look at these statistics, not only over the last couple of years, but over the last decades, what we see is that no, it's not a passing fad. In fact, these numbers are only moving in the wrong direction.
They're snowballing.
Yes.
Yeah, in a very, very intense way right now. And so I think it's like stepping back and taking a moment to realize that offers an enormous amount of clarity for me. And when I consider like where nurse coaching is heading in the very near future, it's like, of course it's catching on. Of course it's catching on quickly, because, I can sit here and I can talk about how the system of healthcare on the whole is failing. Like in real time, it's failing in front of our eyes. For our patients, for providers, right? We've reached this level of complete unsustainability. And I think why nurse coaching is really catching on exponentially is because it offers hope It offers optimism. Instead of sitting here and being afraid of what's happening and feeling helpless and feeling hopeless, it offers this path and it offers this shift in the paradigm in which we're operating. And instead of just feeling like, oh shoot, like now I'm getting caught up in this.
Yeah, I'm being part of the perpetuating the same.
Yeah, you know, it's like we're all just like getting caught up in this ever accelerating cycle of illness and provider burnout.
Which we've all felt. We've all, I think every single nurse has felt that at some point.
Instead, nurse coaching is this shift. It's this like instant understanding that like, holy smokes, something can be different and we can get the best of all worlds and we can begin to shift this thing. And so I think for me, and I think for you as well, like that's why nurse coaching is really catching on and is not a passing fad. If all of the chronic illnesses and all the chronic problems that we're seeing in our society and in nurses, if that's not a passing fad, and if we're not really doing anything different to change things inside of the normal healthcare model, and if nurse coaching is that thing that's changing things, then it's here to stay. It's here to stay in a very real way.
Well, I love the way you put that, because I think that a lot of times when we think about nurse coaching as this new paradigm and why it exists, it's easy to focus on all of the things that are wrong with the current system. And sometimes, you know, you and I think we can be held back. We can have a little bit of fear to even be willing to say out loud, the current model of nursing isn't working. The current healthcare system is broken. Like, to put it in such concrete terms, it makes me a little bit nervous to say out loud, but it needs to be said because it is true and because it is what is being felt by every single nurse out there. So I think we have a tendency to focus on that side of things, the things that are broken and that are not working and that need to be better. But what we often forget to open our eyes to and to feel really hopeful and positive about is what's on the other side, right? Because we're not just using nurse coaching as a platform to be able to move away from all that is not right and that is not optimized. We're using it as a way to move towards all these things that you just talked about: hope, optimism, a brighter future for our population and for our nurses. And I think it is so important to focus on both of those core whys, right? To escape the things that aren't working, but to really regain our sense of purpose in our work.
But what do we know about motivation, right? Is that it always is far more effective in the long run to move towards a compelling vision of the future rather than running away from the thing that's scary. And before I touch on that, I'm wondering, really curious, you said, you know, it can be scary. It's scary to take that stance. And I feel the same way. You know, sometimes I feel the same way, and I'm not sure exactly what that is. What is that fear of speaking what we know and like is factually true, right? 2/3 of people are that sick. If hundreds of millions of people are that sick, if 90% of nurses are burnt out, and if nurses are more unhealthy than the average American, then factually, healthcare isn't working and it's broken. But why is there that fear of taking that stance? Is it feeling like, I'm afraid I'm going to get in trouble for saying what's on the CDC's website? Is it being afraid that I might offend like the one nurse or one or two nurses who are somehow living under a rock and don't agree with me? What is that fear of taking that stance? And to be clear, I'm stoked that this is episode 4 because for some reason I feel like we have a different, I'm super glad like those first 3 episodes were fun, but I'm feeling like more empowered and like more at home inside of this medium. So
I think that there is so much that is right with healthcare, right? We have made so many technological advancements. Modern medicine is amazing. And so for me, part of that fear of not wanting to say out loud, you know, healthcare is broken, is that
you don't want to negate the goodness.
I don't want to negate the goodness, and I don't want anybody who doesn't fully understand what nurse coaching is all about to ever think that nurse coaching is a complete polar opposite of the Western model, because it's not. It is a merging of all that is right and good and working with the Western model and with modern medicine, and simply making it better, simply finding ways to improve it. So maybe it's that it's not so black and white, right? It's not just that it's entirely broken but you have this amazing way of talking about this that always makes me laugh, where you're like, okay, let's look at how many percentage of people, 2/3 that you said, who are suffering and struggling, and the 90% of nurses who want to leave. Like, what if I had to give that a grade? What if this was school, right?
Yes. Yeah. If you had to give that a grade, I mean, 66% broken. So that's like only 33% right.
Right. That's a hard F. That's a hard.
It's a hard F. Yeah. I got that in algebra class one time, and I literally got sent down to the headmaster.
Somebody
was like,
needs to send healthcare to the headmaster.
Somebody needs to send healthcare to the headmaster.
But the problem with that is that I think we've tried that. We've tried addressing these problems to the higher ups and saying, hey, is there somebody up there?
Hey, can you guys fix it?
Right. Is there somebody up there who can fix this?
Can you give me some trickle down healthcare improvements, please?
And the person who's up there at the top, or the people are like, yo, I am profiting so much from this. You keep doing what you're doing down there. You nurses, you keep hustling, you keep working, because I'm good up here. So that's where nurse coaching comes in. We say it's that inside out approach. The boots on the ground, the nurses being fundamental to this solution from the inside out.
Yeah, it's so important, right, to evaluate where factually we are not succeeding inside of the healing arts, and to also leverage the things that like are really inspiring to move towards. Because I touched on this so briefly, but I think it's important to slow down and reiterate that as humans, we always work better in the long run. We're always more motivated by a positive, compelling vision of what's possible. And in understanding of what's broken, we can be like, wow, we have a lot that we can fix. There's so much opportunity to help people. You know, if we were down to like the final 10% of people who are experiencing chronic illness, or the final 10% of people who were still on medication, awesome. Like, I feel like we got into a really good place, because it's likely that, you know, there's a lot of things involved there that maybe aren't related to lifestyle anymore, you know? So I think it's important to like recognize that opportunity and see just the vastness of need inside of this space, and how nurse coaching can meet that head on. 80% of those hundreds of millions of people. I mean, when you think about just even 100 million people, 100 million people, 80 million of them could have their lives dramatically improved through lifestyle coaching. And that's what nurse coaching offers. So that person on that call, is nurse coaching a passing fad? What do you want to tell the other 100, 200, thousands of nurses who are having that same idea, that same question, that same wondering? Like, what would you say?
I want to shout as loud as I possibly can, no, this is not a passing fad. But also, if you feel it, and if you feel it in that strong and profound way, then it is for a reason. And it is because that the strength of that feeling, the profoundness of the work that we're doing, the importance of the work that we're doing, that's not going anywhere. And that's the proof that it's not a passing fad. I just figured out, as I was listening to you talk here, I think I just figured out where my fear comes from around saying the word broken when it comes to healthcare.
Saying the word broken, saying the word failed, yeah.
And I think it's because nurse coaching at its core is a solution-focused model. We don't focus on problems. We don't focus on the word broken. In fact, that is at the very core of our model, is that if I'm coaching you and you are my client and you're coming to me and you're telling me all of the things that you want to work on, perhaps you feel broken and you tell me that. Perhaps you feel like your health is in shambles, but what I'm going to see and know and believe as your nurse coach is that you are not broken.
Yes.
Is that you're completely whole, fully alive, capable of all of the health and wellness and holistic well-being that you want to create. We're just going to get there together, and we're going to take this step by step by step. So I have become so trained in my nurse coaching model and my nurse coaching brain and my way of thinking and understanding everything, people, systems, organizations, the world, to not see them as broken, and instead to see possibility for growth and betterment. And so I think that is exactly why I was saying it's so beautiful the way that you put it, of focusing on the side of it's that is broken, but not living there, not staying there, not having that be the sole tunnel vision focus, and instead recognizing that there is so much opportunity for growth. Whenever there is a problem, whenever something isn't working, what does that really mean? It means we can throw up our arms and say, all right, it's broken. There's nothing we can do. Somebody else needs to fix it. Or we can say, freaking awesome. Look at this. Look at how much opportunity we now have to get in there and make things better. And that is what nurse coaches are doing at every single level of healthcare and of nursing, getting in there and getting our hands dirty and making things better.
Hell yeah. I love that switch. That's makes it a lot more clear for me.
Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that is so true. You know, that's how we live and operate as nurses, right? We see that in the people and in the systems. And so I think sometimes it does feel a little bit inorganic for us to really hone in on those pain points inside of the system. So maybe a different way of seeing it could be, look at the hundreds of millions of people that we could help. Look at the millions of lives that we could save every year through this work. How many people died last year through preventable heart disease alone? 600, 700,000 people? Think about the volume, right? If you could save 80% of those through lifestyle coaching, and that's just one chronic disease out of, a whole plethora. And so I think maybe focusing on that component and focusing on wow, there is so much that we can be doing better. Yes, we are awesome as nurses. Yes, we have this amazing skill set. Yes, we have this amazing machine of healthcare. We'll look at how healthcare touches every single person. Every single person. At one point or another, you are going to end up in contact with the healthcare system. And so why not make it this thing that really empowers people and really gives them what they need to be healthy and thriving as individuals? Because when you do that over and over again, when you have, what do we have at now? We have 5,000 plus nurse coaches out there doing this work. I mean, what they're doing right now is touching the lives of tens of thousands, maybe even 100,000 plus people. And that's just a few years into this work. Maybe that's what we want to talk about next is rising exponentially in just a few years, where nurse coaching has gone from relative obscurity to, I don't know a single nurse who comes into our program anymore. There's probably a couple, but almost all of them have what? They're talking to somebody who has heard of nurse coaching, is a nurse coach.
Their boss mentions it to them. Their colleague mentions it to them. Somebody else, somebody who's not a nurse, heard about it and is like, hey, I think you'd be a really good fit for this.
Yes, 100%. And so I think there is this desire to come into this field. I understand the holding back of maybe it's too new, or is it going to be around for the foreseeable future?
Sure. And those are questions that I think every single nurse should be asking. You should be having those types of questions when you're stepping into something new.
And, I think that also kind of leads into other professional opportunities inside of this field. What can I do? Can I earn inside of this field? Those are things I think we want to talk about and save for the future. But I think we kind of wanted to lay the foundation of hell yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot that we are doing in this moment. So come on in. Come on in, help it out. There's only so much that me and you can do. There's only so much that we can do as individuals. But what we have to recognize is that when we think about the broken system, the broken system is simply a combined effort of all of these millions of parts, millions and millions of micro interactions every single day, adding up to the greater system. So if you want to change the greater system, you have to start with yourself, and you have to start by recognizing that this isn't going anywhere. I want to be part of this movement, and I want to continue to do the work.
The broken system is a symptom of everything else that is not working properly in the healthcare model in general. And so nurse coaches do what we always do as nurse coaches, which is we don't just treat symptoms. We don't just slap a Band-Aid on a problem that needs a real solution. We get in there. We figure out what is the real solution. We get to the root cause. We do that real meaningful work that is, like you said, changing the paradigm, really changing everything. And I like where you're going next here, of kind of talking about okay, now I think hopefully we have painted a picture of why we believe and why I think every nurse who gets in on this work really knows and trusts and believes that nurse coaching is here to stay. It is not a passing fad, but let's also make that real.
There's momentum.
Yes.
There is serious momentum happening inside of here. If we talk about where nurse coaching was at when we got into this field, which seems like a lifetime, but in reality, 6.5-ish years, somewhere around.
But we've lived many lifetimes in those 6.5 years.
Turns out, getting into a new field, starting a business, that will make you live lifetimes. Changing the world. Make it feel like you live lifetimes inside of each year, which I believe is kind of just living life to the fullest.
That's the fun of it.
The obscurity of it.
Yeah.
I mean, we had to go through pretty solid lengths to be able to find somebody, to be able to find nurse coaches to be able to talk to before we got into it, because we were like, is this real? What's going on in this? Luckily, we live in one of those holistic healing meccas, in the Pacific Northwest, where people are a little bit more earthy, a little bit more crunchy. And so for whatever reason, there is that draw. So there were a couple, two within our city. And now that...
Within our state at that time.
Within our state at that time. And now within the span of just a few years, it has just exploded.
I have this memory, and don't quote me on this, but I think I remember that there were something like 250 board certified nurse coaches at the time when we first entered into that field. And it was funny because I remember thinking like, oh, okay, that's a lot, which seems like nothing now. But at the time I was like, well, that's a lot. It means people are doing this. It means it's real enough to be going somewhere. And I trusted on that. But now I look back and I'm like, that's nothing compared to actually how long it took to get to that point, because nurse coaching as a board certification came into existence in 2012, right? And so then from there to 6 years ago, all of that time just to build up that initial momentum of 250-ish nurse coaches becoming board certified, and now getting to where we are today, where we have thousands.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think the closest number was well over 5,000 nurse coaches out there doing the work. And
you and I happen to know, I think, 200 to 500 more that are getting ready to sit for board certification in the next couple months.
So I think what that lends to is that, sometimes it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort to get that initial momentum going, but then it begins to snowball, and it begins to really build and build and build. I mean, when you look at how many nurse practitioners there are, there's 350,000. So is 5,000 near 350,000? No. But what I will say is that nurse coaches are incredibly vocal. They are very, very good at being seen, at being heard, at making their desire for something to be better in their practice, with their patients, in their organization. They're very, very good at being seen and heard.
Because they're so passionate about the work, and
because it's inspiring,
and because they know that it works.
Yes, 100%. And I think that's really where the value comes from. Initially when I got into this work, we were reading about the tipping point, Malcolm Gladwell, and he states that, there needs to be like X number, right? There's the early adopters. There's always like the bell curve of adoption. There's the really early adopters here at the beginning, and then you start picking up pace, and then you start hitting the apex, and then everybody wants to get on board. We're still right here. We're still at the very beginning with the early adopters of this work. But the thing that we have on our side is that deep passion, is that inspiration, is that level of hope. And with that comes like this energy. We often talk about how inside of nurse coaching, how outside of this work, you won't really encounter nurses who are like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be doing this work every single day. I just can't get enough of it, right? It's kind of bizarre. And then when you see it inside of nurse coaching, you're like, what's going on in here? And it's because, as I said, humans are motivated by hope. Humans are motivated by a compelling vision of the future. And I've yet to encounter any other specialty inside of nursing that has a more compelling vision of the future than nurse coaching. There's no other specialty that's promising an 80% reduction in chronic preventable disease. There's no other specialty that's giving nurses a path out of this cycle of burnout and illness that's been ravaging our profession for decades on end.
No matter where they end up, whether it's providing them a pathway to step away from that job that's been training their soul, or giving them the tools and the resources to stay exactly where they're at and find new purpose and fulfillment.
Yes.
You're right.
100%. Yeah. I mean, even if you get into master's level education inside of nursing or doctor levels, yes, awesome stuff, but this provides you the fastest route to begin to make that change and to move towards that positive, compelling vision. So I think we were talking about, switching back to what we were talking about, I'm having a lot of fun here today. This is cool.
Awesome. So I think it is very important for us to go back in time and to remember back when we were getting into this field and how challenging it was in that moment for us to even find a nurse coach who we could connect with. And now how different that really is for any nurse who wants to enter into this field. It's easy now to find somebody who is a nurse coach, who knows a nurse coach, who has worked with a nurse coach in some kind of capacity.
I mean, you can go on our Facebook group right now and talk to, literally, you make one post and you'll get so many people
hundreds of
reaching
people
out to
being
you.
Like, I'll talk to you about it. Yes,
Yep.
exactly. And I think that's just our personal experience of what we have had access to and who we've had access to and how we've seen that grow. But inside of the Nurse Coach Collective, as a training program, I think we can also demonstrate really crystal clear proof of that growth, because when we launched our first collective in the very beginning, one start date equated to about 30, 40 nurses max entering into the program. Now, one start date equates to about 300, 250 to 300 nurses embarking on this journey. And that happens multiple 3 to 4 times a year. So just the sheer quantity of how many nurses are coming into this field, and the fact that our programs always sell out every single time because we literally cannot accommodate, despite the growth that we keep trying to keep up with, that we cannot accommodate every single nurse who wants to enter into this field. But we do our best, so don't let that scare you away. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. And in this case, the pudding is the number of nurses who really enter into this field. And I want people to know about that, because I think it's one thing to understand it from a passion standpoint and from a mission standpoint and an overall philosophical understanding of yes, this isn't going anywhere. This seems like an amazing future for nursing. But I also want you to see the actual numbers and to see that exponential growth is happening in real time.
Yeah, I think that's super, super important. And I think I'll return to just one number that I mentioned, which is that there's about 350,000 nurse practitioners out there. And if there is a need for 350,000 nurse practitioners to handle the volume of care, and there's still a shortage, if there is 4 million nurses inside of our country and there's still this perceived shortage, sometimes it's real, sometimes it's fabricated through hospitals not wanting to pay more nurses, but I'm not going to get into that in this moment, then there is indeed that very real need for so many more. That's why I'm excited to be doing this, because I want to increase awareness. The more awareness that there is, the more nurses that we're going to be able to draw into this field, into this very, very needed field in the here and now.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you emphasize and reiterate that about where we're at right now and the need that there still is in front of us. Because, as you were talking about that exponential growth curve and the tipping point, and now we're kind of in this early adopters phase, it's this is why we are always saying this is the perfect time to get into this field, is when we are right here at the bottom of that curve, because you are not too late. You are not missing out. You still get to be right there in the beginning of leading the charge and really being at the forefront of this movement. And there is so much room in front of us, right? There is such a long way to go. There is only up and up and up that we can go from here.
100%. What else are we now touching on? So we're talking about, the increased number of nurses coming into this world, just the going from 0 to 2,000 in our program alone, more than 5,000 nurse coaches out there. The greater need for it. Is now an okay time to talk about insurance and just how that's functioning, or is there anything else that you want to touch on? Or
I think that's great, because I think that the one thing that anyone in healthcare really can kind of always come back to when they're trying to find out, is this real? Is this going to be around for a while? Is to look at what does the bigger picture say? What does the governing bodies say? And the governing bodies are telling us that it's time to be offering some insurance around this, because it's going to be here for the foreseeable future.
Yes. And, love it or hate it, insurance is the system in which we work. And so until we're able to have that huge, huge volume of nurse coaches being able to truly affect real, systemic level change, deep, deep change, we have to play inside the system that you're in. And I think that's important to recognize sometime. It's you can't fight every single component of the system all at once. And so I think what's really amazing is that there's very real traction for nurse coaching to be having insurance coverage in the very near future, in the next year or two. And this is a multi-year long process. And, shout out to all of the nurse coaches who have put in a boatload of back-end work to really make that a reality for us.
So much advocating, so much policy, so many meetings.
Stuff that's way outside of my wheelhouse. Thank you so much. And so, yeah, I mean, that's just another proof of the whole food plant-based vegan pudding. Another piece of proof of the pudding there, that nurse coaching is indeed around to stay. It's being leveraged in so many different capacities.
And to be really clear on that, so where we're at with insurance, and we can get into more detail on this in the future, but we are not yet at the point of having insurance coverage for nurse coaching services. But there are currently level 3 CPT codes, which means that everything is in the research and development stage, which means that level 1 CPT codes where true reimbursement is offered is coming.
Right on the horizon.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
The final piece that we really wanted to cover is just talking about what's next. And I think that's talking about, okay, so we have this exponential rise in adoption of nurse coaching and acceptance by mainstream nursing that nurse coaching is here to stay. And I think that was a really great question that person brought up on that call, because I think it sparked a lot of insight for us. And recognizing that we have this amazing vision of what's possible, right? Which is that we can prevent, treat, and reverse up to 80% of chronic diseases. So in many ways, we can begin to eradicate chronic disease and nurse burnout. If that's not a compelling vision of the future, then I'm not sure what we're looking for, because that lights me up, gets me super inspired. There's literally thousands of nurses inside of this field, and I expect that number to continue to grow. I'm not stopping. I'm not taking my foot off the gas. You're not taking your foot off the gas. Nurse Coach Collective, we are crushing it, here to stay. We have some great things happening inside of, insurance companies. We're playing by the system's rules, and we're doing what needs to be done in order to increase that mainstream adoption. And I think some of those other questions that came up were about possibilities.
One of the last questions that was asked to me on that live Q&A call was, did I miss the boat? I got so excited about sharing all of this stuff about how nurse coaching is growing actively in this movement, all of the change that we are seeing and the shift in the paradigm that we are actively a part of creating. And she said, this is so awesome. But did I miss the boat? This has been going on for years and years now. Am I too late? Am I too late to be an innovator in this movement? Because that's what I really want to be. I want to be a leader. And what I hope is really clear from what you and I have gotten to talk about today is that not only is nurse coaching not just a passing fad, and is it, yes, the future of healthcare, but also that no, it's not too late. And no, you did not miss the boat, because this is the time when nurse coaching is the rocket fuel is being poured on in and everything is taking off. And I think we recently had, maybe it was in our Facebook community, where one of our current students, who is a nurse practitioner simultaneously, but becoming a nurse coach because she wasn't getting everything she needed out of that nurse practitioner role. And she said right there within her 2022 textbook that she is reading about the foundations of her nurse practitioner role, right there in a textbook, it said they wanted every single nurse practitioner to be introduced to the professional field of nurse coaching, because that is the future of healthcare, the future of moving away from the reactionary model and moving towards this new opportunity to take a different approach to nursing and to healthcare. Right there in the textbook. And I just freaking love that when you get to see it in writing and see that proof there.
It's awesome.
So where do we go from here? If we know it's real, if we know it's not going anywhere, I think the next big question on most nurses' mind is okay, so I'm in for the movement, I'm in for the ride, but what can I do in this field? What's going to be possible for me? And what are the different directions that I can really take my nurse coaching career?
Yes. And we will talk about that on a future episode.
Maybe the next one.
Nurses, nurse coaches, y'all, thank you so much for hanging out with me and Heather here today. We're having a lot of fun inside of this medium. So Heather, great job. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and your expertise.
Nice work, Peter.
Nice work.
Yep.
See y'all in the next episode.
See you next time.